The scrapyard was endless. Mountains of rusted metal, broken machines, and shattered vehicles stretched out under the harsh sun, turning the landscape into a graveyard of discarded dreams. The wind whistled through gaps in twisted steel, carrying dust that stung the eyes and left a metallic taste in the mouth. It was a place where things and people were forgotten. Among the heaps of metal, a faint glimmer caught the sunlight. A small flicker of blue, barely visible beneath a pile of broken machinery, moved slightly. Lyra, an alien woman with cerulean skin and soft glowing eyes, lay paralyzed under the rubble. Her body had been left broken, but her mind was sharp. She had always been strong in thought, curious about the worlds beyond her own. Yet now she was trapped, unable to move, abandoned by those who were supposed to care for her most, her family. She remembered the day it happened. Her family had argued among themselves, their voices raised, their faces tense with frustration and impatience. They could not accept her disability, the way her limbs no longer obeyed her commands. They called it weakness, a burden they could no longer bear. Lyra had tried to explain, to plead for their understanding, but her words had fallen on ears deafened by fear and shame. Before she knew it, she had been taken from the comfort of her home and left here, among piles of cold metal and sharp edges. At first she had hoped it was a mistake, that someone would come back for her, that they would see their error. But as hours turned into days, the realization set in. They had abandoned her completely. Pain was not only in her body, which ached with every small movement she attempted, but in her heart. She had never felt such loneliness. The stars above, which once felt like friends in her night sky, now seemed distant and cold. Her mind replayed memories of her family, their laughter, their shared meals, the small acts of kindness she had once believed were signs of love. And now those memories brought only sorrow. Lyra tried to call out, but her voice was weak, barely a whisper, swallowed by the clangs and groans of the scrapyard. Rusted metal shifted as the wind moved, and she felt the bite of sharp edges pressing against her skin. She closed her eyes, drawing in deep, uneven breaths, trying to conserve her energy. She did not know how long she could last here, exposed and helpless. Hours passed slowly. The sun climbed higher, burning down on the metal heaps, making the air shimmer with heat. Lyra's mind wandered, thinking of all the worlds she had read about in the stories she used to love. Worlds of courage, of friendship, of beings who looked beyond appearances. She wished she could be there now, somewhere safe, somewhere that felt like home. Then, as twilight approached, a shadow moved across the scrapyard. Lyra's eyes, weary and clouded with fatigue, flicked toward it. At first, she thought it might be a scavenger, someone who would strip the place bare without a second thought for anything living. But there was something different about this figure. The way he moved through the metal, carefully avoiding sharp edges, suggested caution, awareness, and perhaps even compassion. The human came closer, his boots clanging softly against the metal ground. Lyra felt a flutter of hope, the tiniest spark she had felt in days. Someone is here, she thought. But hope was fragile. It could be extinguished easily. The human stopped when he saw her, and for a moment they stared at each other. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition of another being's suffering. Lyra wanted to speak, to tell him she was alive, that she needed help, but her body would not cooperate. Her lips moved, forming words that never came. The human crouched beside her, scanning her with careful eyes. He looked at her cerulean skin, her glowing eyes, the way her body lay helpless beneath the debris. Something inside him shifted, a sense of responsibility perhaps, or empathy. He carefully began to move the smaller pieces of metal away from her, working slowly so as not to hurt her further. Lyra felt the lightest touch on her shoulder and flinched at first. Then she realized it was gentle, deliberate. The human's hands were steady, strong but careful. He whispered softly, though she could barely hear, "It's okay. I've got you. You're not alone." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lyra allowed herself to believe him. Not fully, not yet, but enough to feel a pulse of hope in her chest. The human fashioned a makeshift sling from his jacket and some loose metal, supporting her fragile body as he began to lift her carefully. Every movement was painstaking, but every movement was also an act of mercy. As he carried her out of the scrapyard, the last rays of the sun painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson. Lyra's mind, though weak from exhaustion and hunger, tried to grasp the beauty of the moment. Even in despair, even in abandonment, Life had found a way to reach her. The human did not speak much, only occasionally murmuring reassurances. "Almost there," he said once when a particularly large heap of metal blocked their path. Lyra could only nod slightly, too drained to do more, but inside she marveled at this stranger's determination. He had no reason to save her. In fact, helping her might cost him time, energy, and safety. And yet he persisted. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged from the scrapyard into a clearing. Beyond it lay a small settlement, lights twinkling like stars fallen to the ground. Lyra's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Could it be possible that she might survive this night? Could it be possible that she might find someone who saw her worth, even when her own family did not? The human gently set her down on soft grass, adjusting the sling to support her. He smiled faintly, tired but satisfied. "You're safe now," he said. "I'll make sure you're looked after. You're not alone anymore." Lyra tried to respond, tried to thank him, but only a faint whisper escaped her lips. Yet she felt the message reach him. There was understanding in his eyes, a silent promise to protect, to care, to fight for her when she could not fight for herself. As night fell, the stars began to shine above, mirrored by the gentle lights of the settlement. Lyra's body was weak, but her mind was alive, filled with gratitude and the first flickers of hope. Perhaps she thought abandonment was not the end. Perhaps there was still a chance for trust, for friendship, for life beyond the scrapyard. She closed her eyes, letting herself rest for the first time in what felt like an eternity. And though she did not yet know the future, she knew this. Someone had seen her, truly seen her, and that small act of recognition might be the beginning of a life she had almost given up on. The human stayed beside her, watching the stars, listening to the wind, and keeping silent vigil over the paralyzed alien woman who had been abandoned but not forgotten. The night in the settlement was quiet, but Lyra could still hear the distant hum of machinery and the occasional voices of humans moving about. Her body ached from the long hours spent paralyzed in the scrapyard, and the makeshift sling Jason had made offered only partial relief. Still, she felt safer than she had in days. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she would survive. Jason had carried her to a small, sturdy hut at the edge of the settlement. Inside, the air was warmer, and the floor was covered with soft mats that looked far more comfortable than the cold ground of the scrapyard. He gently laid her down, careful to avoid straining her fragile body. Lyra's cerulean skin, smudged with dirt and grime, glowed faintly under the soft lantern light, her alien features delicate yet filled with silent suffering. Jason knelt beside her, looking at her with concern. "You've been through a lot," he said softly. "I'm going to get someone who can help you properly." Lyra tried to speak, to tell him she was grateful, but the words were stuck somewhere between her throat and her lips. She had not used her voice in so long that it felt foreign, almost useless. Instead, she blinked, letting her expression speak for her. Her wide, luminous eyes reflected fear, exhaustion, and the smallest flicker of trust. Jason nodded, understanding the silent message. He left the hut briefly, returning with a woman who moved with calm confidence. Her name was Mira, and she was a healer. She had seen her share of injuries, broken limbs, burns, illnesses, and yet she treated every patient with gentle care, as if each life were precious beyond measure. Mira knelt beside Lyra, examining her carefully. Her hands were soft but sure, moving over Lyra's body without causing pain. She spoke quietly, mostly to herself, assessing the damage. "She's weak, but alive. That's the important part. We can help her." "We must." Lyra tried to move, but her body resisted. She felt a small wave of frustration. Being alive yet unable to act was a cruel sort of punishment, and the thought of never walking or moving freely again filled her with a deep, gnawing fear. Jason placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "We'll get you through this step by step. Just trust me." Trust had been a foreign concept for Lyra. After being abandoned by her own family, she had learned to rely only on herself. Letting another being care for her felt strange, almost terrifying. But something in Jason's eyes told her that he would not harm her, that he would not leave. That quiet promise of protection, so rare and fragile, sparked a tiny flame of hope inside her. Mira worked throughout the night, cleaning Lyra's wounds, applying salves, and ensuring she had enough water and nutrients. She spoke softly, explaining what she was doing. "You're safe here," she said. "No one will hurt you. You'll be able to rest." Lyra wanted to say something, anything, to acknowledge this kindness, but her voice still failed her. She simply nodded slightly, letting Mira know she understood. Even that small gesture felt like a triumph after the silence of abandonment. As dawn approached, Jason sat back, exhausted but determined. He had barely slept, keeping a silent watch over the alien woman he had rescued. He thought about the scrapyard, about the cruel family that had left her behind, and about the fragile life now resting under his care. He could have walked away, many would have, but he hadn't. He couldn't. Jason's mind wandered to the nature of choice. Sometimes, he thought, people are defined not by what happens to them but by what they choose to do in the face of suffering. He had chosen to help Lyra. He had chosen to see her as more than a helpless being abandoned in a scrapyard. That simple decision would change both their lives forever. Days passed, and Lyra slowly began to regain a sense of awareness, beyond pain and fear. Mira continued her care, providing specialized tools and support to help Lyra move her arms and upper body slightly. Each small victory was celebrated quietly, a brushstroke of hope in a canvas of despair. Jason visited her every day, bringing small gifts, a book, a bright-colored cloth, a small mechanical toy he had found in the scrapyard. Each item was carefully chosen, not for value but for the connection it represented. Lyra had never experienced such attention or thoughtfulness before, and it made her heart ache in unfamiliar ways. Through gestures, written notes, and the occasional whisper, they began to communicate. Jason learned about her world, how her people had once lived in harmony with nature, how their cities had floated among the clouds, and how she had dreamed of exploring beyond her home planet. Lyra learned about the humans, about their curiosity, their struggles, and their resilience. It was not easy. There were moments of fear, moments when Lyra doubted whether she could trust anyone ever again. And yet Jason never gave up. When she recoiled from touch, he waited patiently. When she hesitated to speak, he listened quietly. He never pushed, never judged, and slowly, through small acts of kindness, he became a bridge between her past sorrow and the possibility of a brighter future. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Lyra managed to move her hand slightly toward Jason. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense meaning. Jason smiled warmly, taking her hand gently in his own. "I'm here," he whispered. "I won't leave you." Tears welled up in Lyra's eyes. She had cried many times in the scrapyard, alone and unheard. But now, someone truly saw her, someone cared, someone chose to stay. That choice, simple as it seemed, was more powerful than any words could express. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra grew stronger. She began to trust again, cautiously at first, but with increasing confidence. Jason taught her small exercises to regain mobility in her upper body, and Mira designed special devices to help her move independently. Each small success was a victory, each new skill a step toward reclaiming the life that had been stolen from her. But the greatest change was not physical, it was emotional. Lyra discovered that trust could exist again, that compassion could be genuine, that one being's choice to care could heal wounds deeper than any medicine. She began to hope again, to imagine a life beyond fear and abandonment. Jason watched her transformation with quiet satisfaction. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. Lyra had been hurt deeply, and some scars would never fully fade, but he also knew that the simple act of choosing to help, of refusing to leave her behind, had created a spark that could grow into something extraordinary. The bond between them grew, built on shared effort, patience, and unspoken understanding. They communicated in ways beyond words, through gestures, expressions, and the gentle rhythm of daily life. And in those moments, Lyra felt something she had not felt in a long time: belonging. One afternoon, while Jason helped her adjust a mobility device, Lyra managed a small, clear voice. "Thank you," she said, her words shaky but heartfelt. It was the first time she had spoken in days, and the sound was like music in the quiet room. Jason smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "I chose to help because you deserved it, and because no one should ever be left behind." Lyra closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. She had been abandoned, yes, but now she was seen. She had been left to die, yes, but now she had been saved. And in that realization, she found a fragile but undeniable strength. The strength to hope, to trust, and to begin again. As night fell over the settlement, Lyra rested in a small bed, her body still weak but her spirit beginning to heal. Outside, the wind carried the distant sounds of life. Humans talking, laughter echoing softly, the faint hum of machines. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future, not defined by the cruelty of her past, but by the kindness she had been shown and the choices that now lay before her. Jason remained by her side, vigilant and patient. He knew that healing was a journey, not a destination, but he also knew that every choice, every act of care, every moment of presence mattered. And as he watched the alien woman who had been left to die slowly regain her strength, he felt a quiet sense of purpose, the understanding that one human's choice could make all the difference in a life once thought lost. Days turned into weeks and Lyra's world began to change slowly. The settlement, once strange and overwhelming, was starting to feel less frightening. The constant hum of human activity, the distant laughter, the smell of cooked food, and the warmth of soft light at night, all of it became a gentle rhythm she could trust. Each day was still a challenge, but it was a challenge she no longer faced alone. Jason had become a steady presence in her life. He arrived each morning with small offerings, sometimes a book, sometimes a simple meal, sometimes a trinket he had found while scavenging. These gestures, though modest, spoke volumes. They told Lyra that someone cared for her, not out of duty or obligation, but because they wanted to. That realization slowly seeped into her heart, making the long nights of fear and abandonment feel more distant. Mira continued her work, teaching Lyra to use mobility aids and helping her strengthen her upper body. Slowly, Lyra learned to lift her arms, to grasp small objects, and eventually to sit upright with support. Each movement, each small success was celebrated quietly by Jason and Mira. Sometimes Lyra would glance at Jason and see pride in his eyes, not pity. Pride, she realized, was a gift far more comforting than sympathy. It recognized her strength rather than her weakness. One morning, Jason brought a small mechanical device, something he had cobbled together from scraps. "I think this might help you move a little better," he said, adjusting it carefully. Lyra's cerulean eyes widened with curiosity. The device was simple, yet elegant. A small frame that could support her weight while allowing her to pivot her body with effort. With Mira's guidance, Lyra learned to use it. At first she wobbled, tipping slightly with every attempt. Her body, weak from weeks of immobility, protested. Yet she persisted. Jason's hand was always near, steadying her when she faltered, whispering encouragement. "You can do this. One step at a time. I'm here." It was not just her body that was healing. Her spirit, long beaten down by betrayal and neglect, was beginning to trust again. She realized that not everyone abandoned those who were vulnerable. Some fought for them, chose to stay, and refused to leave. Jason was one such being, and the bond that was forming between them was fragile but growing stronger each day. Lyra began to explore the settlement, carefully at first. Jason guided her through winding streets, past the bustling markets and small workshops. The humans greeted them with curiosity and smiles, offering food or a helping hand. It was strange for Lyra to feel included, to be acknowledged as part of this world rather than as a burden. Each interaction, small as it might seem, filled her with quiet joy. One afternoon they reached a small garden at the center of the settlement. Flowers of every imaginable color bloomed, their petals glistening with morning dew. Lyra's eyes shone with wonder. She had never seen such vibrant life so close, and the scents made her feel alive in a way she had almost forgotten. Jason knelt beside her, pointing out different plants and their uses. "These are edible," he said, plucking a small leaf. "And these are just for beauty, for people to enjoy." He smiled. Even in a world full of struggles, there's always beauty if you look for it. Lyra wanted to touch the flowers, to feel their softness, but her body protested. Jason gently guided her hand, letting her brush the petals. She marveled at the sensation, the delicate texture, the subtle fragrance. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small, quiet happiness that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with life itself. As the days passed, Lyra and Jason spoke more, though still in small steps. Words were difficult, but gestures, glances, and shared experiences communicated more than language could. Lyra shared memories of her people, of her home, of the skies they had once floated beneath. Jason listened, fascinated by her stories, absorbing every detail. In turn, he told her of the humans, of their world, their inventions, their struggles and triumphs. Their conversations became a bridge between two very different worlds. Lyra began to see that humans were not all the same. Some were cruel, yes, but others, like Jason and Mira, could be kind, selfless, and brave. She began to understand that trust was not naive. It was a choice she could make again slowly, cautiously, without fear of repeating past mistakes. One evening, under the warm glow of lanterns, Lyra attempted her first words without writing them down. "You help me," she said, her voice small but clear. Jason's face broke into a gentle smile. "Yes," he replied, "and I will keep helping you. Every day, until you can stand on your own." Tears welled in Lyra's eyes. She had longed to hear such words, not from someone obligated to care, but from someone who truly chose to stay. The tears were not of sorrow, but of release. Release from the loneliness and fear that had trapped her for so long. Jason reached out, squeezing her hand gently. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. The bond between them deepened. Lyra began to anticipate Jason's visits, to feel comforted by his presence. She noticed small things. The way he adjusted the light so it wasn't too harsh. The way he listened without interrupting. The way he celebrated her small victories. Each act, though quiet, carried immense significance. Lyra also began to notice changes within herself. Her fear of abandonment, once all-consuming, had softened. She no longer flinched at gentle touch, no longer recoiled at spoken words. Instead, she learned to respond with trust, with curiosity, with the faintest spark of joy. Life, she realized, could be more than survival. It could be experienced, felt, and shared. One morning, Jason brought her a small notebook and pen. "You can write to me," he suggested. "If speaking is too hard, this can be another way to communicate." Lyra hesitated, then slowly took the pen. She wrote her first note. "Thank you for not leaving me." She handed it to him, her hands trembling slightly. Jason read it and nodded, smiling warmly. "I'm glad you trust me," he said. "We'll take this one step at a time." The settlement became a second home to her. She learned the routines, the ways of the humans, and even began helping Mira in small ways. Though she could not perform heavy tasks, she assisted with organizing supplies, cleaning tools, and reading messages. Each contribution, however minor, gave her a sense of purpose. As the weeks continued, Lyra's relationship with Jason transformed from one of dependence to mutual respect and friendship. He taught her small skills: how to identify edible plants, how to handle minor tools, how to protect herself if danger arose. She, in turn, taught him about her people's culture, their history, and the beauty of the skies on her homeworld. Their worlds merged in small, meaningful ways, creating a connection that transcended differences. One night, while sitting outside the hut, watching the stars, Lyra spoke again. Her voice was firmer now. "I never thought someone would stay," she said. Jason nodded, understanding the weight behind her words. "People can surprise you," he replied softly. "Some will leave, but some will choose to stay, and I chose to stay for you." Lyra's heart swelled with emotion. She had been abandoned once, left to face the cold, harsh world alone. But now she realized that not all beings were cruel. There were those who could care, who could fight for another, who could make choices that restored hope. And in that understanding, she began to see a future, one where trust, connection, and care could exist again. The fragile bond between Lyra and Jason became a lifeline. It was not built on obligation or pity, but on mutual recognition of worth. Lyra had been discarded, deemed unworthy by those who should have protected her. But Jason saw her, truly saw her, and that act alone gave her strength. As she rested that night, leaning against the soft mats in the hut, Lyra felt a quiet sense of peace she had not known in months. The world was still dangerous, still unpredictable, but she was no longer alone. There was someone who had chosen her, someone who believed in her, and in that choice she found a fragile, beautiful hope that life could still be good, that kindness could still exist, and that she could survive not just in body, but in spirit. The first seeds of trust had taken root. And though the journey ahead was long, Lyra knew that she had someone by her side, someone who would not abandon her. And for the first time in a very long while, she allowed herself to dream, not just of survival, but of life, connection, and a future that was hers to shape. Weeks had passed since Lyra had been rescued from the scrapyard, and slowly the settlement had begun to feel like home. The sharp edges of fear and abandonment that had haunted her for so long had softened into something she could recognize: comfort. Each day brought new lessons, new small victories, and a slowly growing sense of belonging. Lyra had learned to move more confidently with her mobility aids. At first, even simple actions, turning her torso, lifting an arm, or gripping a tool, felt impossible. But Jason and Mira had never rushed her. Each day they encouraged her, celebrated each small success, and showed patience that she had never known. Through their care, Lyra discovered that the limits she had feared were often just challenges to overcome, not barriers meant to define her life. The settlement itself was a small but thriving community. Humans moved through the streets with purpose, tending gardens, repairing machinery, cooking meals, and exchanging stories. The air smelled of fresh herbs and baked bread, the wind carrying the laughter of children who played freely in safe corners of the town. For Lyra, the first few days had been overwhelming, but as she spent more time among these humans, she began to understand the rhythms of their lives. The settlement was not perfect, but it was alive, and in that liveliness she found a sense of hope. Jason continued to be her guide, teaching her about human customs, their habits, and even their humor. He would point out small things like the way the sun reflected off metal surfaces, or how the birds moved through the trees in the nearby grove. "Look," he said one morning, "even the smallest things are beautiful if you notice them." Lyra tried to mimic his optimism, and though it was difficult at first, she found herself smiling, feeling joy that had been absent for far too long. Mira also played a critical role in Lyra's rehabilitation. She helped design exercises and devices tailored to Lyra's abilities. Lyra learned to balance, pivot, and even crawl with greater ease. The days were long and sometimes painful, but each improvement strengthened her spirit. "You're stronger than you know," Mira often reminded her. Lyra would nod, letting the words sink in. Strength, she realized, was not just in the body. It was in enduring hardship and still choosing to live. One afternoon, Jason suggested taking her outside the settlement to explore the surrounding area. At first, Lyra hesitated. The scrapyard and the world beyond had once felt cruel and dangerous. What if abandonment followed her again? What if someone left her helpless like before? Jason noticed her hesitation and placed a reassuring hand on hers. "We'll take it slow. You're safe," he said. "I won't let anything happen to you." Encouraged by his words, Lyra agreed. They ventured along a narrow trail that led into rolling hills beyond the settlement. The landscape was different from anything she had seen. Grasses swayed in the gentle breeze, and small flowers dotted the hillsides in colors she had never imagined. Birds sang songs she had never heard before, and the sky stretched endlessly overhead, a vast canvas of light that seemed to invite her to dream again. For the first time since her abandonment, Lyra felt free. The hills were not just a physical space. They were a symbol of possibility. With Jason by her side, she could imagine a life beyond the pain and neglect she had known. She tried to move her mobility device along the path, wobbling slightly but determined to make progress. Jason walked beside her, steadying the device when it tipped and encouraging her with every step. As they reached a small clearing, Lyra paused to take in the view. The settlement looked tiny in the distance, a cluster of lights and activity surrounded by the vast wilderness. The world beyond her old life seemed immense yet inviting. Jason crouched beside her. "You see? There's so much more than the scrapyard," he said softly. "So much more than the past. You can start again here." Lyra turned her glowing eyes toward him, seeing the sincerity in his gaze. The past had been harsh, full of neglect and betrayal, but here now, she felt the warmth of genuine care. The realization was overwhelming. For so long she had believed that abandonment defined her. Now she could see that kindness, choice, and connection could define her future instead. They spent hours in the clearing. Jason helped her observe the natural world, teaching her to notice patterns, the flight of birds, the way sunlight reflected on leaves, even the gentle ripple of a stream nearby. Lyra absorbed it all, marveling at the complexity and beauty of this new world. She began to understand that life outside the scrapyard was not just about survival. It was about experiencing, learning, and growing. That evening, as they returned to the settlement, Lyra's mind was full of thoughts. For the first time, she could imagine a future in which she was not a burden, a life in which she could contribute, connect, and even be happy. Jason walked beside her, and though he said little, his presence was enough. It was a steady reassurance, a silent promise that she was no longer alone in the world. Over the following days, Lyra began to engage more with the people of the settlement. She helped Mira organize supplies, assisted children with small tasks, and even learned to perform basic maintenance on simple machines. The humans accepted her without judgment, offering smiles, guidance, and friendship. Each interaction strengthened her confidence, teaching her that she had a place in this world, if she was willing to take it. One morning, Jason brought her to a small library within the settlement. Shelves of books and scrolls lined the walls, each filled with knowledge and stories. Lyra's eyes widened with wonder. She had loved stories as a child, but the scrapyard had taken away any hope of reading again. Now, surrounded by the written word, she felt a spark of excitement that had been absent for too long. Jason handed her a book with colorful illustrations. "Start here," he said. "Take your time. You can read aloud if you want, or just look at the pictures. It doesn't matter, just enjoy it." Lyra nodded, carefully turning the pages with her hands. The words felt strange at first, but slowly she began to read aloud, her voice gaining strength with each sentence. Jason listened attentively, nodding and smiling, encouraging her gently. Through books, Lyra discovered not only the human world, but also ways to imagine her own future. She learned about distant lands, inventions, and ideas she had never considered. Each story inspired her, filling her mind with possibilities. For the first time, she believed that her life could be more than survival. It could be meaningful, joyful, and even extraordinary. At night, as she rested in the soft bed prepared by Mira, Lyra reflected on the changes in her life. The fear and pain of abandonment were still present, but they no longer controlled her. Jason's patience, Mira's care, and the acceptance of the settlement had given her tools to heal. She had learned that hope was not a fragile thing, but something that could grow even after despair. One evening, Jason brought her outside to watch the stars. The sky was clear, and countless points of light shimmered above them. Lyra's eyes glowed softly in the dark as she traced patterns among the stars, remembering tales of her homeworld and the skies she had loved as a child. Jason pointed out constellations from human stories, and together, they created a shared sky of imagination and wonder. "You see, even in the darkest places," Jason said softly, "there's light waiting for you. Sometimes you just have to look for it." Lyra nodded, feeling the truth in his words. Her life had been dark, abandoned, and cruel, but light had reached her in the form of compassion, patience, and trust. And now she could see that her story was not over. It was just beginning. Lyra's confidence grew further as she began to explore small, creative projects. She learned to repair broken tools, help design simple devices for the settlement, and even paint small murals on walls. Each act, though small, gave her a sense of contribution. She was no longer passive in her own life. She could shape her surroundings, connect with others, and create beauty where none had existed. One morning, while tending a small garden with Jason, Lyra laughed for the first time without restraint. A small breeze had blown petals into her face, and she shook her head, grinning, the sound echoing across the courtyard. Jason laughed with her, delighted by the sound. "See, happiness is possible," he said. Lyra nodded, feeling the truth of it in her heart. By the time the sun set, casting golden light across the hills, Lyra realized that she was no longer the frightened, abandoned alien who had once lain under rusted metal. She had grown stronger not just in body but in spirit. She had discovered that kindness existed, that trust could be rebuilt, and that the world outside the scrapyard offered endless possibilities. And as she looked at Jason, standing quietly beside her, she knew that the journey was far from over. But for the first time she felt ready, not just to survive but to live fully, to embrace the world and to step into a future of her own choosing. The months that followed were a time of growth, discovery, and healing for Lyra. No longer confined to the scrapyard's cold, rusted prison, she moved through the settlement with growing confidence. Her body, though still not fully strong, responded more willingly to her efforts, and her mind, once consumed with fear and despair, now brimmed with curiosity and hope. Lyra had come to understand that life was not defined by the cruelty she had endured, but by the choices she made and the people she allowed into her world. And in Jason, she had found someone who had chosen her, a being who refused to leave her when others had abandoned her. The bond between them had grown stronger, evolving from caretaker and patient into friendship, trust, and eventually something that felt like family. Every morning, Lyra awoke to the soft light filtering through her small hut. She would take a moment to stretch, practicing movements that had once seemed impossible. Jason was usually nearby, preparing a simple breakfast or tidying the space. The small rituals of daily life, eating, talking, walking, became exercises in connection, trust, and normalcy. Each act, though mundane, felt monumental because it was part of a life she had almost been denied. The settlement itself had become more than just a place of refuge. It had become a community. Humans who had once regarded her with curiosity now welcomed her as a member, asking her advice, offering her tasks, and including her in gatherings. Lyra had begun to teach some of them about her world, the colors of her skies, the gentle hum of her homeworld's rivers, the cultural traditions she had once loved. The humans listened eagerly, fascinated by her perspective, and through these exchanges Lyra discovered the power of sharing and being seen. Jason watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. He had saved her life, yes, but he knew that survival was only the first step. The true challenge and reward was helping her reclaim it, to find purpose, joy, and belonging once more. Sometimes he marveled at her resilience, at the way she had endured neglect and abandonment and yet still found the courage to trust and grow. One day, Jason suggested that they return to the scrapyard, not to reclaim it but to leave something behind. Lyra was hesitant at first. The place was a symbol of betrayal and pain, a reminder of those who had abandoned her when she needed them most. But Jason's calm reassurance gave her courage. "We're not going back to hurt you," he said. "We're going to mark it so it can no longer define you. You've survived, you've grown, and now it's time to leave a reminder of that." With careful steps and Jason's support, Lyra returned to the scrapyard. The rusted metal towers loomed like monuments to neglect, but Lyra did not falter. She carried with her a small marker, crafted from scrap metal but carefully polished and bright. It was a symbol of survival, resilience, and hope. Placing it gently among the heaps of twisted machinery, she whispered, "I survived. I am more than this place. I am alive." Jason watched silently, knowing the significance of the act. It was more than a marker. It was a declaration that abandonment would not define her, that she had the power to claim her own story, and that life could be reclaimed even after betrayal. Returning to the settlement, Lyra felt lighter, as if a burden she had carried for too long had been lifted. Her movements were steadier, her confidence more pronounced, and her heart more open. She began to engage with the community in ways she had never imagined. She helped tend gardens, repaired small machines, assisted children in learning tasks, and even collaborated with Mira to create tools for others with disabilities. Every act of service strengthened her sense of purpose, reminding her that she had value and that her life mattered. Jason remained her companion, teacher, and friend, but now their relationship had evolved. They shared stories, laughter, and dreams. He encouraged her to pursue her interests and respected her independence. Lyra realized that true connection was not about dependence, it was about mutual respect, trust, and shared effort. In Jason, she had found not just a savior, but a partner in navigating a world that had once seemed hostile and unforgiving. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, casting long golden shadows across the settlement, Lyra and Jason sat together outside her hut. The air was warm, scented with blooming flowers and the faint aroma of cooking fires. Lyra's cerulean skin glowed softly in the fading light, and her luminous eyes reflected the stars beginning to appear above. "I never thought I would have a life like this," Lyra said quietly, her voice steady now. "After the scrapyard, I thought I was lost." Jason nodded, his expression gentle. "You were never truly lost. You just needed someone to help you see what you already had, the strength inside you and the people willing to stand with you." Lyra smiled, a rare, genuine expression that lit her face. "I have hope now," she said, "and I have you." Jason's smile mirrored hers. "And you have me," he replied. "Always." Days turned into weeks and Lyra continued to thrive. Her mobility improved, her confidence grew, and her connection with the settlement deepened. She found joy in small things, watching the sunrise, tending the garden, helping children learn, and sharing stories of her own world. Each day was a testament to her resilience, a reminder that life could be reclaimed even after the deepest wounds. The humans of the settlement grew to cherish her presence. They admired her courage, learned from her knowledge, and were inspired by the way she had faced abandonment and despair without losing hope. Lyra, in turn, learned the value of community, kindness, and shared responsibility. She realized that family was not always those who shared your blood. It could be those who chose to care, to protect, and to support you. One morning, Mira approached Lyra with a small group of children. "Lyra," she said gently, "these children would like to learn about your world. Would you teach them?" Lyra's eyes lit up. She had dreamed of sharing her culture, her history, and her stories, but had feared no one would care. Now surrounded by curious young faces, she found joy in storytelling. She described the floating cities of her homeworld, the gentle rivers that shimmered with light, and the traditions her people had celebrated for generations. The children listened in awe, asking questions and imagining the world she painted with her words. Jason watched from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. Lyra had grown beyond the fragile, abandoned alien he had first found in the scrapyard. She was thriving, contributing, and inspiring others. He knew that she had not only survived, but had begun to live fully, embracing the possibilities of a life she had once believed impossible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the settlement, Lyra and Jason walked together to the hill overlooking the town. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting the colors of hope and renewal. Lyra looked down at the settlement, the people she had come to care for, and the life she had rebuilt. "This is my home now," she said softly. "Not because I was given it, but because I chose it. Not because I was loved before, but because I have been loved now." Jason squeezed her hand gently. "And you will continue to choose it every day. You have a family now, one that you build with your own heart." Lyra nodded, tears of gratitude glimmering in her eyes. She had been abandoned once, left to die in a scrapyard. But she had found life, kindness, and connection. She had discovered that family was not always born. It could be chosen, nurtured, and strengthened through care, trust, and love. That night, as Lyra rested in her bed, she felt a profound sense of peace. The fear, loneliness, and despair of her past had not vanished entirely, but they no longer defined her. She had learned that survival was not enough. She could thrive, grow, and embrace the beauty of life. In the days that followed, Lyra became an integral part of the settlement. She taught, helped, and inspired. She laughed freely, explored boldly, and continued to grow in strength and confidence. Jason remained by her side, but their relationship had become a partnership built on trust, mutual respect, and shared experience. And though her past would always be a part of her, it no longer held power over her. Lyra had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her spirit. She had found a chosen family, humans who cared, respected, and loved her. And in that family, she discovered the greatest truth of all, that even in a universe that could be cruel and unforgiving, hope could flourish, trust could be rebuilt, and life could be extraordinary. As she looked up at the stars that night, Lyra whispered quietly to herself, a smile playing on her lips. "I am alive. I am loved. I am home." And in that moment, surrounded by those who had chosen her, Lyra finally understood what it meant to truly belong.